Good evening, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our environment public hearing, Discovering a Litter-Free Columbus. Before we begin, I would like to thank everyone for their work and preparation for today's presentation and discussion, including Sherry Palmer, the program manager with Keep Columbus Beautiful, who will be providing the presentation this evening. I'd also like to thank our panelists, Tim Swager, Administrator for the Department of Public Service, Division of Refuse, Heather Robinson, Director of the Environmental Crimes Unit, Franklin County Prosecutor's Office, Andrew Booker, Programs Manager for the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio, Lisa Boggs, Neighborhood Activist, South Central Hilltop Block Watch, Bill Huffman, Neighborhood Activist, My Project USA, Homes on the Hill, and Trent Smith, the Executive Director of the Franklinton Board of Trade, Franklinton Litter League. I'd also like to thank the staff here at Dodge Recreation Center who prepared the space for us this evening, CTV, who's providing our technical in the filming technology today, Derek from Keep Columbus Beautiful for the booth that he's provided, Officer Turner for showing up this evening, and a special thank you to all the members of the public for taking the time to join us this evening as we collaborate with one another and discuss how to address litter in our great city. When I first took this office in January, I was interested in meeting as many people as I could throughout the stretches of the city. And what I found consistent throughout the city is that litter and dumping is one of the top concerns in many, many neighborhoods. And so it was my ambition to hold these hearings to give the public the opportunity to speak, voice concerns, offer suggestions, and help to come up with some solutions. But let's be clear, this is a societal problem that many people just don't care, and we see it every day as we drive down the road and watch people just toss randomly outside their car window. Things have changed from when we were, at least I'd like to say, from when I was growing up, and the fear of a $500 fine kept you from throwing even a banana peel out the window. And so what do we do to curb some of the societal problems that we have today and develop a solution that helps to engage as many people as possible to make our community a greater place? And that's what we hope to accomplish through these hearings and with some of the follow-up that will be coming down the road. I'd like to remind everyone that there will be an opportunity to provide public testimony. If you'd like to do so, I ask that you please see Jeff Carter in the back and fill out a speaker slip. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. We will accept speaker slips until the end of the presentation. In order to get through all the speakers, we will likely not be able to address all of your concerns this evening, but be assured that my staff and the Department of Public Service, as well as our members from City Council, will continue to follow up with you. The purpose of this meeting is to engage and collaborate with the community to foster a strategic plan to combat litter in the City of Columbus. We will begin the hearing with a presentation from Keep Columbus Beautiful, who will discuss the issue of litter as it relates to statistics, crime, safety, stakeholders, and best practices. We will then turn to our panel discussion, and then finally we will welcome public testimony following. I'd also like to note that this discussion is to address litter throughout our city. It is not exclusive to any particular area of town. We welcome all to share your ideas and concerns and experiences. Some of the topics that we want to attempt to address this evening are understanding our litter problem and how we can combat it. How do we engage, educate the community and get buy-in? What are the environmental impacts of littering? What programs are available and who provides them? Who our city partners are and what their responsibilities are? How much the city spends to address, combat littering, and the legal ramifications of littering. Now I'd like to introduce Sherry Palmer with Keep Columbus Beautiful and turn the mic over to her.
Thank you, Councilmember, and good evening to the panel. It's an honor to be here and to be speaking to you about a passion that I believe we all have, and that is unfortunately something that isn't good. It's called litter. Now, litter comes in many forms, and we are trying to deal with it from picture an entire pie and dividing those pieces up so that everyone has a role in solving this problem of litter. In November of 2017, Keep Columbus Beautiful, we are also an affiliate of Keep America Beautiful, introduced a strategic litter plan. Our plan is just like that pie. It identifies roles for every single stakeholder that has an opportunity to make a difference in what we're seeing, preventing us from being a totally clean community. So we'll start with you as the individual. You have all kinds of opportunities. You might be a parent, you might be working as an employee, but one of the things that you can do is every time you see misplaced waste, and that's really the definition of litter, you can pick it up and put it in the appropriate receptacle. By doing that, you're setting an example. You're setting an example for people around you, and you're setting an example if you have children. And if everybody is picking up what they see, whether it's a piece or 10 pieces, imagine what that could be. Okay, so then we go into our neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods, from Keep Columbus Beautiful's perspective, have been the front lines on litter. They are looking at visible litter and dealing with the public right-of-ways and trying to get a handle on how to stop litter from bringing in more crime. We know that if you have litter on the ground, it's going to attract more litter because people don't care. And they say, oh, there's some litter there. What I have in my hand will go on that pile. And before you know it, you've got a lot more litter gathering. So the neighborhoods have been doing cleanups. Keep Columbus Beautiful, of course, is a supporter with equipment, gloves, bags, litter grabbers, coming to us at 1265 Marion Road, or hubs that we have around town to make it easier for you to get that equipment and organize. Now, many people here, Trent Smith, Bill Huffman, Lisa Boggs, they know firsthand what's going on in their neighborhoods. They're organizing their neighbors to do big cleanups. What we see is all of these people coming to us from around the city, but we're not seeing anything sustainable. So our goal for the neighborhoods was to try to ensure that at least every neighborhood was doing something every month. So we introduced something that we're going to expand upon this spring, and that's called a litter index. We would like to have a baseline, and like you to have a baseline, of what litter looks like in your neighborhood. What's a litter index? Very simple. You're getting in a car with 4 people. You have a scoring system of 1 through 4, 1 being very little litter on the ground, and 4 being, let's bring in the National Guard. You know, we really need some help in getting this done. So then what do you have after that is you take a look at what you've seen street by street. Where's the worst? Where are the hot spots that maybe you have a convenience store, maybe you have an abandoned property? You can take a look at that, and then we're asking you to formulate a plan strictly for monthly. This is not deep cleaning. This is saying what you have to do in your neighborhood to make sure the first perception that you see is not one of litter. So if I'm coming in and buying a house on Trent Street and I see lots of litter, what am I going to think? Or I might be going to West Broad Street and wanting to do some shopping or walking, and I'm seeing litter, and I'm hearing all these wonderful things about revitalization, and I'm thinking, oh, nobody cares. You know, this is going to attract crime. This might not be a safe area. That is not what we want for Columbus. And so all the money going into our city to make it better, to build our neighborhoods up, we have to make it clean. So that's one piece of the puzzle for neighborhoods. Everybody has something currently that works. Trent's doing Litter League. Linda's busting up Sullivan Avenue. Bill is working on the Camp Chase Trail. These are big movements. And so if we're doing something every month and we're still deep cleaning, my goal would be to have a captain for every block and make sure that that street is cleaned up by the block. And what does that do? That brings you outside. That makes you knocking on doors and engaging with your neighborhoods. Everybody has to do their share, and then it becomes community engagement. So that's our neighborhoods. What about our businesses? We all know, and I'm not afraid to say it, how many of you shop at Family Dollar? I'm a Family Dollar junkie, but I hate going there because every Family Dollar in the entire city, their parking lots are not clean. And I'm sorry, but we've called corporate and we've talked to managers, and you know, it's a very difficult problem. That's just one example of businesses not doing their part. They're serving you as a retail outlet for our neighborhoods. We need them to do their part. Keeping their parking lots clean is very important. So I'm suggesting to businesses that let's go back to the old-fashioned way. You know, people like Trent who run a trade association can talk to those major corridor businesses, the front door to entering your neighborhood. It's important. Hey, can you make sure you have a trash can as soon as you enter the business? It's as simple as that. Can you clean your windows? Make sure there's no litter upon the entryway. Keep your parking lot clean. And maybe even having a community appearance standard for our major corridors so that every corridor in the city has standards that we expect. We expect the corridor to be clean. And, you know, and if not, we're going to, you know, put in a code violation. So we need to be tougher, not anti-business, but just asking businesses to join the neighborhood in the efforts to make it safer and cleaner. Now, we have government well represented here today, and everybody maybe wants to point fingers and say, oh, you know, it should be the city doing this or county doing that or the state, ODOT's not doing their part. Well, I can say this is a great example of our city getting together and agencies sitting down and talking about what we can do to work together to solve the issues of litter and illegal dumping. Well, we've got some serious things going on, but if no one's talking to each other, so, you know, we have a wonderful asset. We've got Tim Swager with Refuse. He's in charge of all the alleys. We have some of our folks from Refuse here tonight, and they go up and down your streets. Who knows our city better than our refuse drivers? They're everywhere. They can see what's going on, and they've got different vehicles, and we've got different containers, and so are they sometimes part of the problem? Unfortunately, they might be. If they're picking up those big cans, and the residents haven't done their part by bagging their trash or tying the bag, or we've had scrappers coming in, dumping things, and then we pick it up and then we're dumping things. So we're doing a better job of looking at how we can solve that. And Tim's going to talk to you more about that. So I'm very proud of it. We have an excellent environmental court, and we've got our Franklin County Prosecutor. So all of these people are starting to talk and gel and say, we're going to work together and we're going to get this problem solved. So that's really a good thing. Now, all right, if 85% of litter is human behavior, and human behavior is really difficult to change and shape for adults, and we know it because that's why we're seeing the problems that we have to start again with our young people. We have to teach our young people to be socially responsible. And Councilmember Remy explained, he and I know if I grew up and threw something on the ground, I would know there would be no living at that point. But our children don't have good role models. And why is that? Nationally, 51 billion pieces of litter are on our roadways. Now, when I was growing up, we had messages. We had a crying Indian. We had a don't litter bug. We had all these things that made sense and messages constantly that you don't litter, and your parents telling you the same thing. That's gone away. There's not a lot of national attention about litter, and it is killing our environment. So we, as KCB, SWACO, we're in the schools. We're bringing curriculum-based, approved standard lessons and activities into the K through 6, certain things for our middle school, and we are declaring our high schools litter-free zones. Why? Because you and I all have pride in our high schools. We go back. We go to games. That's the high school's part of your community. Everybody wants to say, go Bulldogs on the south side and have that pride. Well, it's not really good if you're going there to support the team and you're buying your refreshments and they're throwing trash on the ground. So we need to get pride developed from the older to the younger. In my experience, Trent, you have a young son. Has he told you, Dad, stop doing that? Because my teacher said, that's not going to happen, you shouldn't do that, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that we have the little ones learning. They go back to the parents who have not been instructed on proper behavior, and they are getting it. Nothing like being put into place by your young person. So, education, very critical. Getting our young people now so that we have future generations. Keep Columbus beautiful. Oh, and I'd be remiss to say, if you have any education questions, our new education coordinator is in the back room, Derek Houlihan, and he's out there trying to get in the door with our programs. So keep Columbus beautiful. We're an affiliate. We're totally volunteer driven. We're part of city government. And so we, for the very first time, are trying to make sure that what we're doing across the city makes sense. So if I'm mapping all these people that are coming to us for supplies and calling and saying that they want to clean up, that I can look across and say, okay, we've got monthly cleanups going on in every neighborhood. Then we've got Lisa's event. Then we've got Litter Leagues going on. We might have a big citywide event, but we know then that we're doing the best we can to make sure that these areas are targeted. Is it easy to organize people on a volunteer level? Get them engaged? Pull them out of their houses to pick up other people's trash? No. You got to make it fun. We were in Linden. We had an older woman get up to the microphone. Tim Swagger thought this was pretty good. She said, "We need to make litter sexy." Well, they didn't let me talk at that point, but I'm a firm believer of, if anybody's seen the movie Legally Blonde, there's a move in that movie called the bend and snap. And that's how you get it. You go down, you pick it up. And Maybe you're making a move on that part of it, but you're having some fun, you're getting some exercise, and it's all about fun. And maybe if it's not fun, then there's food involved. So everybody does something a little different, but the main thing is, are we getting every street? Are we getting those routes to school? The main arteries, the major corridors. So that first perception of your neighborhood is going to be a positive one. People are going to come there, want to buy a house, want to send their kids to school, knowing they'll be safe walking, and maybe even feeling safer throwing some things in the alley when you hear some of the great things that are going on here. So if you need anything, we're your research person on litter. I am so tired of that word. Please let me plant flowers. Please let me come and beautify your neighborhoods. I don't want to have you for the rest of the 10 years or 20, however it's going to take to get this city rallied up, picking up litter and not planting. Okay? So, with that, I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and hope you go away very excited tonight.
Thank you very much, Sherry. Appreciate the opportunity to hear from you and really appreciate your dedication with Keep Columbus Beautiful. Actually, I'd like to thank everybody on the panel today. It's really exciting to have everybody here that's here because everybody's dedicated to combating this epidemic within the city, and I think it's almost safe to say some have made it their life mission to do so. So looking forward to hearing the discussion this evening, and so let's start out with Trent down at the end. I'd like to ask each of you guys to introduce yourselves, maybe talk about some of your initiatives that you're doing and how people can get involved if they so choose.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I am the Executive Director of the Franklin Board of Trade, and we
Microphone is on.
Can you hear me now? Is that good? Thank you. We started a program called Franklinton Litter League and modeled it after the program that had already been very successful in the Linden neighborhood. I wish that I could say that I actually came up with the Litter League name because it's such a cool name, but Linden had done it for many, many years, and we decided to go ahead and model after that. And really the effort there was to give people some ownership and some skin in the game as far as being responsible for the street that they live on. And so the Litter League concept is that we have teams of people throughout the neighborhood in various sections of the neighborhood who have teams of, some teams have 2 people, some teams have, 25 people. It doesn't really matter the size of the team, it just matters that the team is dedicated to cleaning up their streets. So as Sherry had mentioned, the Board of Trade does serve as an equipment hub for Keep Columbus Beautiful. So we've tried to make it easier for people within the neighborhood to acquire equipment, borrow it, and be able to do cleanups and not have to travel all the way to the KCB offices, even though they're not that far away. It just makes it easier if on a Saturday or a Sunday they want to come and get stuff from me, it's easier to do that. But Litter League was actually designed to be even more convenient for them, because what we did is we wrote a grant through United Way Neighborhood Partnership Grant process, and we're able to get enough money to buy each of the teams their own equipment. So everyone had stuff in their house at their disposal at any time, so that if they see litter on the sidewalk, they can just go out and take care of it right away. So last year, we ended the season with 15 teams. We picked up just a little shy of 1,200 bags of trash. And then this year, we are currently at about, I think the last count I had was 28 teams. And I don't have an accurate number on where we are with bags collected yet, but we will have that information at the end of the season. But one thing we've done this year as well, in response to some of the illegal dumping that's been rampant in all of our neighborhoods, is we actually have a relationship with a company in Franklinton to acquire dumpsters, so that on a couple of Saturdays a month we go out and collect bulk out of the alleys. So when people, when landlords do a set out and they throw couches and mattresses and chairs and whatever else in the alleys, we're trying to do a better job of keeping up with that type of activity as well. Certainly, we're making a dent, but there's still a lot more to do. But as the program continues and gets more popular in the neighborhood, we're hoping to see more and more of an effect of having people all throughout the area taking their part and taking ownership of the problem. One other thing that I'll just kind of piggyback on what Sherry said. I've been spending some time in the schools as well, talking to the youth about the problem and having their participation as well. So I've been talking to Dana Avenue Elementary School, part of the United School Network's curriculum or school works. Franklinton Preparatory Academy and Central High School have been schools that all have teams as well. And then finally, what I'll end with and then pass it on to Bill is we are currently in the process of trying to establish a special improvement district for Franklinton as well that will be solely focused on safety and cleanliness in the neighborhood. So hopefully that will be a funding mechanism that will help us actually hire folks to be ambassadors, similar to what you see in the downtown Sid area, where you have these ambassadors on the street picking up trash, pulling weeds, just doing their part to make sure that the sidewalks are nice and tidy, and so that it makes that neighborhood more inviting for people to want to come down and visit. So those are just a few of the things that we're doing proactively in the neighborhood, right alongside with other organizations in the neighborhood like FAN. Rebecca Hunley's here, Franklinton Area Neighbors Association. They do a lot of trash pickups as well. And do a lot to address the bulk in the alleys. So it's really a team effort in Franklinton, and we're just kind of getting started with this, and hopefully we expand it and get better at it as the years roll on. So I'll pass it on to the next panelist at this point.
Thank you very much, Trent. Bill, go ahead. You're up.
Good evening, everyone, and I appreciate everyone taking the time out of their schedules to show up tonight. I am Bill Huffman, the operations manager for My Project USA. They are a relatively about 4-year-old organization that is here combating sex trafficking and drugs. I have a unique position on this job here is the fact that 4 years prior to that, I was out in the trenches out picking up trash every day in the community with Friends of the Hilltop. Now I'm in a position that I'm helping a community learn what they need to know as new residents to Columbus and to the United States of how they're supposed to deal with litter, where they come from countries that don't have any litter control whatsoever. When you bought something, if you discarded the paper, it went on the ground. And that would be Wedgwood. Wedgwood has come a long ways from where they were 2 years ago, and the initiative is by the work of the executive director, Zerka Abed, and with Friends of the Hilltop and with other organizations have come together to help combat this problem of litter. It is really bad in the city, and I'm so tickled to death to see the initiatives that's coming forth to combat the problem of litter in our communities. I've worked with South Central Hilltop, I've worked with Highland West, also Franklinton Area Neighbors with Rebecca. There are many organizations out here. You just have to reach out and find out who's active in the community. We also have Rachel here from Cream and Sugar, who has been a great participant in helping with the litters in the community. And to our friends from the Refuge Department, I can't say enough. When you call them, they react. And that's what we need, is a community where our city and our organizations work together. And I thank you very much and pass it on to you.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? My name is Lisa Boggs, and I want to thank Councilmember Remy for bringing us all together, because this issue is the issue that's holding our struggling neighborhoods back from realizing their potential. And I feel like we're not seeing the forest for the trees, because trash, when you're engulfed in trash, you feel like trash. You feel horrible about where you live. It entices criminals to your area. It gives off such a bad vibe, and I feel like we haven't concentrated enough on it, but I'm glad that we're here tonight thinking about it. And my history with trash started actually in 1997. I started a block watch over in South Central Hilltop. And we would meet with our liaison officer, Norm Russell, and talk about the broken window theory as it relates to crime. And I was like, wow, yeah, this is really for real. I mean, the trash really brings out the criminals. I mean, when the criminals come into a neighborhood and see that it's blighted and unkempt, they feel like they can do whatever they want. They think no one cares, so they set up shop in the neighborhoods. So that's when I started, about 2002, hooked up with Sherry and Bob with Keep Columbus Beautiful, and started organizing cleanups and going to other people's cleanups, because there were a few people doing cleanups back in the early 2000s, mid 2000. There were other groups doing cleanups too. But about 2008, that's when I started just taking the bucket out myself, my bucket and my grabber, and just hitting these alleys by myself. I said, I can do a cleanup myself. You know, I don't care if anybody's with me or not. I'll go out for hours a couple times a week. And also inspired some of our other neighbors to get out and pick up trash too. I have one neighbor that has lost 85 pounds because she's out here every day in our streets, in our alleys, picking up trash every single day for hours. And we have other neighbors that are going out maybe once a week or so. But then I noticed, you know, we could clean trash all day and really not get anything done. That's when I decided to start hitting my social media, Facebook page, and start posting these pictures and letting people know this is what's going on. Look in your alleys, look around you, look and see that you're engulfed in trash. And at first, folks were just like, oh, yeah, that stinks, you know, that's horrible. But year after year, we kept, you know, going out, doing trash, doing the cleanups, and I think more and more people are becoming involved. We've done videos, we've done news stories. You know, that's how I actually got hooked up with Jim Spencer, the greatest man in the city of Columbus. I'm telling you, there is no one better. I'm not kidding you. When you have a problem in your alley, you call Jim, because he helps us. And so we're going to continue doing our cleanups, spreading awareness. But I think the first thing we have to do is be an example, and that means us getting out here with the bucket and grabber, and maybe just doing our block, or do like my friend does. She does every day. She gets out for hours. Well, you don't have to do that, but I mean, just get out and make a presence in your neighborhood and let people know that you care, and keep just spreading the awareness about the issue of trash and how it's holding us back. And we just got to get the media involved. We need the media to do a story every week. I think we should really work on getting the media to do a special every week, and maybe highlight an alley or something. I think you had enough of me now. I'm on to the next person here. Sorry. I could go on and talk about trash. Thank you guys for listening to me.
I could as well, actually. Yeah.
There's my posse over there.
Right.
Thank you.
My name is Andrew Booker. I work for SWACO. I work for the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio. And like Lisa, I could talk about trash for a long time. I used to work for Ohio EPA for 20 years. I worked in Ohio EPA's Division of Solid and Infectious Waste Management. SWACO is a little bit different in terms of our role and our kind of relationship to the issue. My fellow panelists here are really focused very much at the neighborhood level. SWACO works with we're a Franklin County organization, and we work with all 41 communities in Franklin County, all the villages, townships, and cities. You may know SWACO from the fact that we own the landfill, and you may know us from the fact that we work with communities, schools, all kinds of organizations on waste reduction and recycling initiatives and education campaigns. But part of our overarching mission is also just the overall proper management of solid waste, and obviously littering and really open dumping, the kind of larger scale kind of problems that we see throughout the city, is a issue that we try to address as well. And we do that through something called the Environmental Crimes Task Force of Central Ohio. It's a partnership, and my colleague Heather is going to speak to it here in a second. But it's a partnership between SWACO, Franklin County Prosecutor's Office, Franklin County Sheriff's Office, City of Columbus, Franklin County Board of Health as well. And we try to identify, investigate, and prosecute open dumping throughout all of Franklin County, including the City of Columbus. I've left some information on the table back there, a brochure about the task force, and a little card that we have produced for citizens, actually. One of the central components of this task force is a website called itsacrime.org and a phone number that's available to all citizens in Franklin County. It's 871-5322. And you can call and report open dumping incidences or litter incidences through this website and this telephone number, and those will get routed either to the City of Columbus or to the Sheriff's Office to be investigated and prosecuted. And so that's SWACO's role, is really through sponsoring this partnership task force to address littering and open dumping.
I'll say that to piggyback on that, I'm particularly excited about the Columbus Police app that will be out, Mobile PD, which will be out in the next couple of months. It's in development right now, because it'll give people the opportunity to report these things, the same type of things, using the app, and it will send it directly into the police. The police can then, we'll make sure that we get it routed to the appropriate authorities. But if you're like me, it seems like, and you drive enough, it seems like every week I watch somebody throw a bag of trash out their car window, and sometimes I'm quick enough to grab my phone, to catch them in the act. And so be nice to have this ability, and of course people that are out in the community, such as yourselves, I'm sure quite often see things, and so to be able to report that, I'm particularly excited about this opportunity. It really gives the community the opportunity to be engaged in policing our neighborhoods, especially when it comes to litter. So, Heather.
Thank you. My name is Heather Robinson. I'm an assistant prosecuting attorney for Franklin County, specifically for the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office, Ron O'Brien's office. And as you may know, my office prosecutes felony-level offenses typically, and then the city prosecutor's office handles misdemeanors. But in my office, for a quarter of a century now, we've had an environmental crimes unit. And I am the director of that unit now, so I specialize in the prosecution of environmental crimes. And that includes pollution crimes like open dumping, and that includes crimes involving trash, tires, construction and demolition debris, infectious waste, in addition to water pollution crimes, etc. So we do take those cases very seriously, and in fact, the cases I prosecute are primarily investigated by, as Andrew mentioned, the Environmental Crimes Task Force of Central Ohio. And that unit is funded by SWACO. It exists because of SWACO. And it includes 2 detectives with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office, and then investigators with the City of Columbus's Refuse Department. Also includes a Franklin County Board of Health sanitarian, and they act as civilian investigators, and then obviously the detective does the police work on the cases. So they investigate the cases, they forward them to me for prosecution. And I, as is true of my office in general, the pollution crimes that I prosecute tend to be the dumpings that are a little bigger, a little more involved, but anything dealing with tires will definitely come to me. And I know, because I've prosecuted many cases that have occurred in Franklinton and in the hilltop areas, I know that a lot of the littering that's occurring in your area is paid open dumping type of crimes. A typical case that I see involves, for instance, a landlord who is taking a house between tenants, and he does a clean out of the previous tenant's materials, and maybe he does a little bit of construction and renovation inside, and he takes that waste and he hires someone. I usually call them fly-by-night haulers, but he will hire a fly-by-night hauler to take the material away, and that hauler just travels 1 or 2 streets over and dumps it in the alley. So that's a very typical thing that I see in Franklinton and in other areas of town as well. We see the same thing with the used tire stores. I drove up Sullivan Avenue, a large distance up Sullivan Avenue the other day, and I think I counted 7 used tire stores just in the block in this relatively small area that I traveled. And we see a lot of dumping that is being pushed by these scrap tire stores, frankly. So again, my unit within my office prosecutes these cases as felonies. They can be 4-year felonies and also as misdemeanors. So we say that there's no case that's too small, which is true because often when we're trying to go after a particular target who we know is responsible for repeated acts of dumping, we will prosecute a series of smaller cases that we can connect to them. So again, the unit's called the Environmental Crimes Task Force, and again, thank you SWACO for funding it, but we've been around for about 25 years.
I'm Tim Swatter, the administrator for the Division of Refuse Collection. The Division of Refuse Collection, obviously, we pick up the trash within the city of Columbus. We also have Keep Columbus Beautiful. Sherry works within our division, and we have the solid waste inspectors. The 3 solid waste inspectors handle each section of the town. Those solid waste inspectors are the ones that do the investigations of illegal dumping. They also handle other aspects, but that's their main focus is to concentrate on illegal dumping cases. With that, we are guided by Title 13, which is a city code that guides what we can and can't do. That is the section of the code that we are currently looking at to make changes. And Councilmember, we anticipate at some point after getting feedback from these hearings, making some recommendations to council for their approval in that Title 13. But that's what guides us in a lot of what we do and are allowed permitted to do is under that code. With that code, a lot of the areas that we often get feedback in is like the set outs and all that. That is what could be or needs to be addressed within the current Title 13, and that's where we would intend to address those issues. But again, the main focus of the Division of Refuse Collection is collecting the trash that is in the containerized collection services for us. And then we are currently working on this litter initiative and illegal dumping, which is new to us this year.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our panelists for your introductions. Why don't I'll start off with some questions. I'm going to start down with Trent. Just keep it to a couple of minutes so we can get through as many of these questions as possible. But Trent, in your opinion, what are the main causes of litter in the city of Columbus?
From my perspective, I think one of the main causes that people do it is just, as Sherry alluded to, it's already there, so they feel like it's no big deal, and it's not their responsibility to do anything about it. I also feel like as a city, we could do a better job of enforcing some of the penalties that go along with littering. I mean, obviously littering is illegal, and there's a penalty that would go with that. There's a consequence that would go with that. But we don't do a good job of making people aware of that and holding them accountable when they do litter. So, and I know it's tough. I mean, we all know that catching these people in the act is probably the most challenging thing to do. But once we do that, I think that if we made an example of that situation and made it much more public and really kind of touted the fact that we're getting serious about it, that would be a good thing in my mind. So yeah, I don't think I really want to expand on the answer much more than that, other than just that we need to do a better job of the enforcement and issuing the consequences in a swift and serious way.
Thank you. Go ahead, Bill.
I agree also with Trent. The main cause of litter is that there's a lot of apathy in the city about where people should do with their litter. I mean, when I was raised under the rule that when you bought a candy, that wrapper went in the trash can. It didn't go on the ground. And if it went on the ground, it was your behind that was on the ground. We don't have that kind of, well, I guess you could call it therapy today. People just have a nonchalant attitude. Well, it's not my problem. The trash isn't my problem, but it is. It's everyone's problem. And the more you have to look at it, the more it disgusts me that people just have become, they just don't care anymore. So how do we change the attitude? Like Trent said, we enforce the laws, make an example of it, raise the fine up. Hit somebody hard in the pocketbook one time, it'll get the word out. You don't want to drop that piece of candy wrapper on the floor because it's going to cost you $1,000. That's a lot of money for a candy wrapper. So, Councilman Remy, that's my answer.
Thank you very much, Bill. Lisa?
Well, I think the number one generator of trash is the landlord set-outs, the clean-outs, and the rehabs. That's mostly what's blighting our alleys. Also, there's no immediate place to throw your trash away as far as the littering. You know, if somebody's walking down the street with a can or some chips, there's usually no immediate place to dispose of the litter. So I think the lack of immediate places to dispose of the litter is one of them. And also the packaging, I feel like just everything is just so overpackaged, and that goes along with no place to dispose of the litter. So those are my three main issues with littering. I think three causes of littering is the set-outs, clean-outs, and rehabs, no immediate place to throw, and then the packaging.
Andrew?
I'm not sure that I have a lot more to add than the panelists. I do think this idea of community pride, neighborhood pride, and personal responsibility is really what it boils down to largely. I spend most of my time and energy kind of on the recycling side of education and outreach, but there's a parallel here because really we're trying to make people just conscious when they have an empty plastic bottle to put it in the recycling container versus the trash container, and there really is a very analogous thing, just to take the small step of if you're going to have a piece of trash, put it in the trash can, not on the ground. So.
Thank you. Heather?
I think greed is a huge driver of the problem. In the cases that I prosecute, where you have, for instance, landlords who are hiring these fly-by-night haulers because they're the cheapest person to hire, they know that this person isn't going to drive all the way down to the landfill to dispose of this material if they've just paid them $50 to haul it away. And then the transporters themselves, the haulers themselves, they know very well taking the job that they're not going to spend the time and money and gas and then have to pay the tipping fee at the landfill. So they want to maximize their profits, and that all comes back to greed. So from that standpoint, it's not very much different really from a lot of the crimes that we prosecute. And then a second cause, nothing good ever happens in an alley. And our alleys are set up such that they're the perfect place to commit dumping crimes. So they're by their nature secluded, they're off the main streets. There are these tunnels that are usually boarded on each side by privacy fences, by garages, by shrubbery and trees. All of these things impede the view of the alley from anyone located in the homes or even on the front streets. And then we put in these alleys, I mean, if I were going to commit a crime, I'd do it in an alley, to be frank, because that's a great place to get away with it. And then we make it worse because we put these 300-gallon containers in the alleys that are just convenient places for illegal dumpers to drive up and down and dump their trash. And I apologize because I don't mean to say that the 300-gallon containers are a bad idea, because I know that when they were put into place, there were a lot of really great ideas for it. And I know the city of Columbus meant to do a great thing with it. And probably in a lot of areas they work just fine. But in our problem areas, that's where people go to dump their scrap tires, to dump their construction debris. And when they fill up those 300-gallon containers, of course, the residents have nowhere to put the trash, so they put it on the sides of the containers, on the ground, and then animals get into it, and people drive over, and it gets strewn around. And often the people who are illegally dumping in those containers, they pile it on the ground as well. So alleys, I think, are a major problem. And I think it would also be helpful, and I have no idea if this is feasible, I just put that right out there, if there were places located closer to downtown, close to these neighborhoods that are having dumping problems, where people can take bulk waste themselves. So I think frequently people will clean out their garage or their basement, or they just get like a new couch and now they have this giant box and all this packing material, and they want somewhere to take the trash. But if you call bulk, which does a great job the majority of time, but they're busy, and so it's usually a couple of days out, they don't want the trash sitting around their house or in their driveway, and it sits around out on the alley waiting for bulk to pick up, or they'll hire some fly-by-night transporter to take away and it gets dumped. So again, I don't know if it's feasible, but if we could have locations where the people who actually are willing to take it somewhere, but don't want to take it all the way down to the landfill, because it is quite a drive, and I think there's a little bit of an intimidation factor there as well at the landfill, then I think that would be helpful.
Thank you very much, Heather. Tim?
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of those same comments that Heather just made there. Definitely, as many know, we're looking at the 300-gallon containers in many of these problem areas. We recognize that illegal dumping in those is problematic, so we will continue that program. There's also a lot of personal responsibility. I mean, a lot of people just simply don't take responsibility for their actions. They drop that stuff, they move along. There's no consequences. As we mentioned before, we'd love to find people more. We'd love to catch more of these. It's very difficult to find someone that did the illegal dumping, track it to them, prove they did it, and get a conviction. I mean, Heather, we bring a lot of cases forward, but there's many times that people will call in to 311 and say, someone dumped back here. And when we ask them for information, they don't know who did it. They don't know when it showed up. They don't know, well, there's nothing we can really do other than go collect that. We're not going to stop illegal dumping. And also, we get a lot of people that have turned stuff into our 311 system anonymously. Well, when we get an anonymous complaint about illegal dumping, we can't even investigate it because there's nothing for us to do other than go collect that. Because if no one's willing to step forward and say, hey, I saw this person do it, or I got this license plate number, or I got this information, there's nothing that we can do with it from a prosecution standpoint. All we can do then is go continue to collect it. And quite simply, we cannot keep up with it if without doing enforcement on this, we're never going to be able to combat this entirely by ourselves with this division. We have to work in coordination with the neighborhoods to stop this. We have to get convictions. We have to also clean up, but it's a two-part system.
Thank you very much, Tim. Heather, this question is directed to you. In your experience, would you say that most individuals are aware of the consequences of littering in our city? And could you share what the consequences are and how this information can be accessed and shared with the public?
As I already mentioned, the larger cases, the open dumping cases, it can be a felony level offense, up to 4 years in prison. Most cases we prosecute, we will charge as a littering offense. That's up to 60 days in jail and a $500 fine. On cases that I prosecute, I'm seeking to change behavior. So I don't want it just to be a slap on the wrist, a $25 fine, and you walk out of the courtroom and you're done. Because again, I think most of this is driven by greed. The cases that I see, it's greed. So I try to make it the penalty such that it's too expensive to be considered just a cost of doing business. I think that I think some folks do, some of these haulers and some of the landlords who hire them and some of the used tire stores that hire the fly-by-night transporters, they take into account the fact that if they get caught, it's probably going to be a slap on the wrist. So one of the types of remedies that I really like to see put into place by the court is a community service cleanup. So when a person is convicted of one of these crimes, they're put on probation, and it's years-long probation. They have to clean up the material they dumped, and then they have to spend time on the Franklin County Environmental Court's cleanup crew picking up other people's trash. And I think once you're out there on the street picking up other people's trash, that gives you a whole new perspective on the problem. And I think that's a very just resolution. And we also seek penalties, monetary penalties that are high. I mean, a typical dumping case of maybe half a pickup load of material, for instance, will probably be $500 restitution to the health fund and about a $200 fine and court costs and probation and community service. So these are penalties that make people think twice, in my opinion. And I also believe, obviously, enforcement is very important. I've already told you about my unit, but the Columbus Division of Police, they forward a number of cases to me every year. So I know CPD officers are aware of it. And when I have a case from a Columbus police officer, I make sure that I contact that police officer. And I thank them for investigating it and for bringing it to my attention. And I always tell them the outcomes of the cases so that they understand that there's a direct good result of their investigation and the time that they've taken. And in terms of whether people understand these penalties, I know that some areas do understand. Tire transporters, for instance. I know they talk about me. I don't want to sound paranoid, but we know they do because we listen to their jail calls. So they know that our unit exists, and we've actually seen a behavior change. About 5 years ago, we started having police officers pull over vehicles that were carrying more than 10 scrap tires. Because to do so, you have to be registered with Ohio EPA. And if you aren't registered with Ohio EPA and you're hauling those tires, it's a felony potentially. Well, that law is in place to try to prevent dumping of tires. So just by beginning intensive enforcement of that law, we saw about a 50% reduction in tire dumping. So that industry knows. But then again, they changed their tactics. So they started hauling their tires in closed panel vans. So, they're always trying to stay ahead of it too. I think that the people who are in the business of illegally hauling and dumping, they know, and what the consequences are. It's a cat and mouse game. And then I guess the other thing I just want to say is for the cases where it's one person, throwing a wrapper on the ground, throwing litter on the ground. I mean, they know they're not supposed to be doing that. I don't think there's anyone in the United States at this point who doesn't know it's wrong to litter. So I do love the fact that we talk about education, because that is an important component, especially though it's educating kids. And I've talked to Sherry Palmer about this. You have to get them when you're kids. You have to make it part of their own personal ethic that they're not going to be the kid who's dropping their candy wrapper on the ground. I think by the time they're adults, it's almost too late. I hate to be cynical. Sorry for the long answer.
Thank you very much. Lisa, how do we engage residents and get them involved with litter cleanups?
Well, I normally, like for our cleanups, I went out and handed out 300 flyers in the streets. I was on Sullivan Avenue. I invited the prostitutes who did come to our cleanup this past Saturday. We had 6. One stayed the whole time and actually cleaned litter the whole time. She had her vest on, and she was a part of it. I mean, it was really heartwarming, very heartwarming to see that she wanted to be involved, because she understood too that litter makes you, and this is her community too, that litter makes you feel not good about where you live, and she lives here too. So I feel like if you're out like talking to your neighbors, I post a lot on my social media. I also do email and call my neighbors. I have a phone tree that's really long, and call my neighbors and let them know, what's going on, or do we want to go out and hook up with some buckets and just a couple of us go out and hit the streets, and we have fun. When we go out, we have great fun. This last cleanup, we had music, Everybody was, the vibe was so good. I mean, we had pizza, we had, Donato's threw a pizza party. We involved the tire shop. Actually, Gina's Tire came over with several cases of pop and snacks, and he was a part of our cleanup too. Try to get out and engage some of the Sullivan Avenue businesses. You just got to get out there a little bit. And if you can't get out there, just, on your social media, your telephone, your email list, just keep talking about it. This is important to us. It's important for our community. It's important for our future. So we just got to keep talking. We got to keep setting examples.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Bill, what about you? How do we engage the residents and get them involved?
For me, being involved in the number of community organizations that I'm a part of when I know there's a cleanup coming is to make sure that everyone in the organizations are aware that there's a cleanup coming, where it's going to be, what time it's going to be, and what all can be expected. So social media is a big part of how we get the word out today. It's not like we have the Columbus Dispatch anymore or the messenger that goes to every door. So it makes it more difficult to make sure that you can reach every citizen here in the Hilltop area or outside the Hilltop, in Franklinton or wherever the cleanup happens to be. So it's important to everyone spread the word. When you hear about a cleanup coming, tell your neighbor. Share. They'll tell us, yeah, share, absolutely share.
Thank you very much. Trent?
With what Lisa said, trying to do something to make it fun, and that's what Litter League was really all about. Us adopting that program from the Linden neighborhood, and the other thing I think that's important about that is to try to make it convenient for them. So, I love the idea of having like these big Saturday cleanups, and where they all show up at one time. But part of my idea with Litter League in Franklinton was to make it convenient for them so that they could do it when it was convenient for them. So if Saturday didn't work, well, they could do it Saturday night because they have their bucket and their grabber at their own disposal. And the one thing that we also did, we made these cool T-shirts with a cool little logo and the Pick It Up logo on the back that was...
Where's mine?
Was right there. So yeah, making it fun, making it as convenient as possible, and just giving people some ownership. So, like for example, one other thing about Litter League is people pick they designate their home field, and so one of the cool things about that is I can drive down somebody's, if I know where their home field is, I can drive down there, and it's either going to look great or it's going to have litter, and I can call them up and say, hey, when's the last time you guys were out there? So and not to harass them, but just to give them some accountability in the fact that maybe they haven't been out there recently. So, but I think making it fun is probably one of the biggest factors to get the community involved.
Thanks. And of course, Sherry, I know we mentioned a little bit about this, but you have all the supplies that if any group wanted to come out. And the nice thing is we've made these available at our other locations throughout. Go ahead and talk about that.
We do have hubs in Franklinton with Trent. We have them at Morse Road, at our refuse station, and also in Georgesville Road. So, kind of around town. And then we're also giving out equipment to Civic Association and Block Watches who will do a litter index and agree to do a monthly cleanup with the same day, same time, and same route every month. So they're getting some small equipment to keep in the neighborhood as well. And, it's really important for this consistency, going back to education again, in that if we have these monthly efforts that we know about, that we can list, we are wanting to connect back our students into these neighborhood projects. So Trent indicated he's got 3 schools. We know a lot of our high school students need service credit hours. It's very easy for us to work with the principals and the intern coordinators to say, here are cleanups, dates, times, locations. your students can go anywhere in the city. If they're not living in their neighborhood and they're staying with grandma or auntie, they can still join a neighborhood cleanup and get their service credit hours.
And I think one of the things, Tim was looking through his brochures here, and one of the things that we're really excited about, and it's going to take a couple of months, but we will be getting basically an oversized vacuum that places like Franklinton, the Hilltop, can check out to go through alleys and literally vacuum up the trash. And we had a demo of this a couple of months ago. It's really impressive, and so excited about that. Tim, if you want to comment on it.
Yeah, it's a sweeper vacuum, and the idea here is that we would purchase one and give it to KCB, and then organizations that are recognized through them can come sign it out, borrow it, and assist them in litter cleanup. There'd be a little training to go with it, obviously, but it's essentially a trailer-mounted vacuum that you'd pull behind on a pickup truck or a small car with a hitch, and it's got a large hose, and it just helps you suck up the loose debris.
It's really cool. Andrew, we talked a little bit about SWACO's role, obviously helping to fund the Environmental Crimes Task Force, but what is SWACO's role overall in combating litter in Columbus and Central Ohio?
Well, again, our jurisdiction, our responsibility is for all of Franklin County, so we operate a lot of programs that are kind of available to all these communities that we work with. Our primary kind of approach when it comes to litter and open dumping is this kind of collaborative partnership model where we really try to support our partners, City of Columbus, Franklin County Prosecutor's Office and the Sheriff Department and other communities that deal with the same issue. One of the things that I wanted to mention that I don't think a lot of citizens realize, two things. One is, just this It's a Crime website and this phone number that I mentioned that you can report it. That information, in the case of a Columbus citizen, in the case of open dumping or littering within the City of Columbus, would end up getting over to the City of Columbus. You could do it through the 311 phone number as well. It'll get to the right people. But what I was going to mention is two things. I think that maybe citizens don't realize the importance. Tim mentioned it and Heather mentioned it of, the photograph, the license plate number, something like that really helps us be able to prosecute these things. Heather will sometimes refer to your cell phone as your personal investigatory tool. So just snapping that picture, when you get on our website, you can actually upload photographs or videos right to the website, and that will get then utilized by the investigators. The other thing that I think people don't realize is that their own home security cameras, if it captures photographs or video of somebody perpetrating a crime, that can be used as evidence as well. I think a lot of citizens don't realize that can just be utilized by the police department. And then finally, both Tim's office and the Environmental Crimes Task Force, we actually have surveillance cameras available. So the community groups, neighborhood groups, where if you could really, communicate to us, there's an ongoing problem in our neighborhood, and particularly at our Tuesday meeting, for instance, somebody said, well, there's a red pickup truck that comes through and is illegally dumping. We haven't been able to kind of get that photograph or that license plate, but we know it happens. If we can identify hot spots, we've got some resources available. The city does itself directly, and the Environmental Crimes Task Force. We can potentially put up some surveillance cameras to help really catch people in the act. So it's important that citizens know that they are really an important piece of the puzzle here in terms of addressing some of these issues.
Go ahead, Trent.
That's a good point, because I remember, I think this was just like maybe 3 months ago in Franklinton, we had a situation where somebody had came through an alley and dumped just like this massive amount of stuff. And we reported it to Tim, and Tim came back and asked if we had any better video footage of it. And I went back to the person that called me initially, and they did. And you did find we were able to zoom in and get the license plate number. And I want to say it was within just a couple of days that you got back to me where the guy had been identified. He was ordered to come out, clean up the trash, and paid some sort of a fine. I'm not sure what it was. But anyway, I say that to make the point that if we could get the residents of the neighborhoods willing to give that information, because I know how frustrating that must be when you get a call and they're like, well, I don't want to give you my name and number because, you know, then they might come back and do something to my house. And I get it. I mean, I would have that same sort of concern, but at some point we've got to get over that and just go ahead and be willing to give our name, give our address, you know, give the information that we have so that you guys can do your jobs. Because once you have that information, the job does get done. And I think that we maybe could do a better job of making that point so that the people of the community realize that, you know, they're not giving that information for naught. It's to get the people held accountable. So I think we could do a better story of telling that information as well.
Thank you, Trent. Bill, let's start with you. What effect do set-outs have in a neighborhood?
Set-outs have a devastating effect on the community because, number one, the tenants know that they're scheduled for an eviction and they sit there till the last minute to move out. And the landlords, at this point, they don't care as long as the stuff is set out so they can change the locks on their premises and get the unit cleaned up and rerun it. It makes the neighborhood look like a trash bin when you go out there and see tons of somebody's furniture that, you know, 9 times out of 10, most of the tenants are not going to come back and pick it, so it can sit there for weeks on end unless somebody happens to call bulk refuge. And that's another issue to be dealt with, is because they don't pick up private property is something that the city's got to work with, how we can solve this issue so this stuff doesn't sit out there for weeks on end.
Trent, go ahead.
Well, I would just echo what Bill's saying. I mean, set-outs are terrible. I mean, we have our more than our fair share of unscrupulous landlords in the neighborhood, and it's ridiculous. I mean, you can tell when a set-out has happened because you know, I drive down my alley, you know, the day before and there's nothing, and then I come down the next day and it's riddled with, you know, like you were talking about, construction materials and mattresses and couches and just all kinds of stuff, and clothes everywhere. I mean, you know, clothes are incredible, but yeah, and then that just adds to the fact that people, you know, look at that neighborhood as nobody cares. And it's tough to get volunteers to come out and help with that, because, you know, now you've got to pick up a couch and you've got to have a truck to put it in, and then you got to have a place to haul it to. And so one of the things that I would make the point about the set-outs and that problem with the bulk stuff is that I mentioned earlier that we have a relationship with a company right there in Franklinton that will provide us, usually at no cost, and if he does end up giving me an invoice, it's below just whatever his cost was. If the city could set up relationships with companies like that within our individual neighborhoods, where we could have a dumpster at our disposal at any time, I think we could do a better job of taking care of those bulk set-outs without having to, because it's way more expensive for the city to come down and take care of that problem than it would be for me to help get that problem taken care of with a local person that has the ability to provide a dumpster. So I hope that maybe we can come up with some more innovative and creative solutions to that situation, rather than, you know, having the city spend their dime to come out and do that for us, especially when it's just like a one-off here and a one-off there. If it's a whole bunch of stuff, we would need help.
Lisa?
Embarrassment. I mean, the set-outs are the most embarrassing punishment to the whole neighborhood for someone else not paying their rent or whatever reason that they're set out. I feel like we need to implement some legislation that requires that the landlord bring a dumpster in and the bulk never even sees the light of day. So just right straight from the house. I mean, they've been given what, 2 months? 2 months in order to, like, through the eviction process. I don't know how long that is, but they've been given quite enough time. They know they never come back for it. They never come back for their stuff. The whole neighborhood and outsiders too come in and just scrap through the stuff and throw it in the street, and we end up with everything, with trash everywhere. And what's even worse is the cleanouts. That needs to go straight to the dumpster too, not to our alleys. Our 300s are for our residents that live here, not to supplement a landlord's bottom line. So I think the cleanouts need to go be part of the dumpster, the renting of the dumpster, or however they're going to take it out. And the same with the rehabs. I'm so tired of toilets in the alleys. They need to go to a dumpster and be hauled away. None of that clean out, set out, or rehab needs to ever see the light of day of our alleys.
Thank you. Tim, talk about set outs as they relate to the bulk pickup situation, and then what the proper procedure is for landlords or people that are rehabbing and that sort of thing.
Certainly. I concur with you on the set-outs. It's a very problematic for the Division of Refuse. We struggle with this because normally they're not scheduled. No one calls in the bulk. All of a sudden, a whole house will show up in front of their, from curb to curb, from sidewalk to porch. There's a difference for us. Evictions under our current Title 13, if you're evicted and there's a court order, you're legally not allowed to schedule bulk under our code. So and we work with the courts, we get an eviction list every time they put them out. So 1 or 2 a week, we'll get a list of all the evictions. So then we contact 311 and we stop those properties, and they're required to dispose of that. The property owner is required to dispose of that properly, not through the Division of Refuse. The difference being is in a set out, that is when legal action hasn't been taken. That's simply they were going to evict them, so somebody moves out, or simply the end of lease. The lease is up, someone moves out, and then the landlord comes in and puts everything they owned out of the curb because they've left it there. The current Title 13 does not address those issues, so we struggle with that internally with the division. And what happens is we only have so many bulk stops that we can do every day for all the locations in the city. So when we get these set outs, we're affecting tens of other people in those neighborhoods that have scheduled just a couch, a chair, a dining room table, which is truly what bulk is designed for, because we'll end up sending a truck and two workers over there for an entire day picking up these set outs. So there's a big financial impact, but there's also an impact to the other residents that simply get their bulk pushed out further and further because we can't schedule them, we can't get to them, because we're spending so much time handling these set outs and these end of lease situations.
May I add something on that?
Go ahead.
Tim's point is great, and I also want to add that the City of Columbus, we pay by weight to dump at the landfill. So when landlords basically push the set out or the material between tenants, even if it's not a technical set out, when they push that onto the city in bulk pickup or in the 300-gallon containers, we all pay for that. We pay for that. And we're essentially subsidizing the business of the landlords. They should be made to pay for that. And then the other point I wanted to make is that in the littering statute under the revised code, which is the statute I find to be most helpful when I don't want to file a felony, and the city's statute mimics this. I actually cannot charge someone for littering if it's on property they own. So when these landlords pile a mountain of trash in the front yard of the property, I can't prosecute them for litter because of the way the statute's written. So the City of Columbus could modify its littering statute in the Columbus City Code to get rid of that prohibition against charging people who own the property.
Appreciate you bringing that point up. I want to wrap this up real quick because I want to get to the testimony as well. But each of you spent about 60 seconds thinking, are there any other thoughts or resources that we haven't touched on this evening that you'd like to share with us? And we'll start down with Trent again and move our way down, but try to limit it to a minute.
Well, I'm really appreciative to hear what Heather just said about the way the statute is written. I mean, if that sounds like that's an easy fix. I mean, that sounds like that's a no-brainer. So, and then the other thing I would just reiterate is just, I think the ability with us to partner with other businesses within our own neighborhoods to help alleviate some of this burden on Tim Swager's team you know, as he just described, you know, trying to send people out to pick up a properly scheduled couch pickup from a tax-paying resident of Columbus, and then that's getting delayed because we have these set-outs. I mean, if we can fix that problem, I think we would go a whole long way of fixing the overall problem. And if it's as simple as fixing the language in a statute, well, we should get that done. I mean, we should get that done like right now.
Bill, go ahead.
I agree with what Trent said, but also there might be a possibility in here that the city attorney's office might want to look at is the fact that maybe when the eviction's filed, that the increased cost of what it would cost the city to pick the furniture up would be attached to the eviction clause itself, that is paid by the landlord when the eviction is filed. So if the city doesn't have to come and pick it up, that money could eventually be refunded back to the landlord. But this encourages the landlord to charge the tenant when he moves in. You don't move your stuff when you move, at the time you move, I'm keeping your money. So there might be another avenue to help the city regain some of the costs that they've had to lose over the years for the landlords that have made plenty of money off the tenants that have lived on our premises. And I think it's ridiculous that we have to even look at it, anything. I understand the law says they have, 24 hours from the eviction date that they're set out. After 24 hours, the residents shouldn't have to see this furniture sit out there. Their landlord should be responsible to call someone and have that furniture removed within the 24 after the 24-hour period is up. Nobody should be subject to look at this mess.
I would like to point out one thing, that it is imperative to point out in the neighborhoods that bulk should not be put out more than 12 hours prior to their bulk pickup assigned date. It's not, you don't call bulk and get a date 2 weeks out and make the neighborhood look at it for 2 weeks. It's 12 hours the night before, just like our containers that we put out. If we need to adjust the code on that, we will, but certainly that should be the standard practice. So if you call for bulk, you don't make your neighbors look at it for 2 weeks until the date comes. You make sure and put it out only the night before for that pickup date. Lisa?
I don't really have anything else to add except just keep on being an example and keep on sharing and bringing awareness to the fact that the trash is what's holding our struggling communities back. I think in the future we may want to re-envision our alleys, maybe make our alleys a place of maybe have gardens and artwork, and that's kind of way far down the road, but it's kind of in my head to re-envision like what alleys could possibly be. It could be a gathering spot for the neighborhood. Once we get the alleys cleaned up, might be a nice place for, I plant flowers in my alley. Maybe have alley or flowers in the alleys and maybe artwork, and have a drink after work or whatever with your neighbors, have it be a nice little like park place. It would be like, that's just like way in the future. But I also know that our state representative from House District 17, Adam Miller, is working on a bill, blight bill, House Bill 633. I don't know where he is with that, but that addresses that, the being on your property, that you can't litter on your own property, and that's kind of addressing the set-outs. So you might want to hook up with State Representative Adam Miller and see what he's doing on that.
Contact with his office and of course, Representative Boggs as well. Sure. Andrew?
Did we lose it here? Might be a good thing between the city and the state to work together on this bill so that the residents of Columbus benefit from that bill being passed.
Sure. Andrew?
The only thing I would add or reinforce or maybe just support is that clearly there is no one solution to this problem. It's complex. It involves, city services, human behavior, a whole variety of things. And so really the only way to address these kind of issues is by this kind of cooperative approach between the citizens and the government agencies. And so this kind of a forum and these kind of neighborhood discussions, I think, are really important for us to all kind of get in alignment to kind of do our individual parts to help the situation.
Heather?
We have a secret weapon in Franklin County called the Franklin County Environmental Court. And I mentioned it briefly earlier, but I want to mention it again. Judge Dan Hawkins presides over a docket that includes only environmental cases. So it's littering and dumping cases, as well as the civil cases, the code enforcement, and the refuse cases. And I know from personal experience from working in that courtroom for so many years that he's well aware of all these issues, and he does take the cases very seriously. So the thing we have going for us is that if we can get the cases into the courtroom, we have a sympathetic judge.
Very much, Heather. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone, we are looking at Title 13 currently. We're going to be looking at changes that may be needed. We want feedback from citizens on what they feel would be beneficial. Certainly we'll be making recommendations to the council at some point in the future to update our code. It's not been substantially updated in 20 years, so we certainly have room for improvement there. Also, just as overall, where we view the litter and illegal dumping is we, the government side of this, are looking at the alleys. But I also don't want anyone to forget that the front of the streets, that's going to have to be resident driven. You're going to have to take ownership of those neighborhoods. You're going to have to do your cleanups in your neighborhoods. We can work on alleys if the residents work on the front, and then we need to work with the businesses and to handle the commercial corridors. That's the only way we're going to do this. None of us are going to succeed on our own. So I do, implore everyone that we have to work together. We can work on one side of the street if you're working on the other, but we simply don't have the resources and the ability to conquer it all, every street, everywhere.
Thank you very much. It definitely takes a team effort. We appreciate everybody tonight on the panel. We have 4 speakers to speak this evening, and want to remind everybody that you have 3 minutes. As you come up, please state your name and your address and any organization that you might represent. Brian Scarpino, you're the first speaker.
Good evening. My name is Brian Scarpino. I reside at 1232 Livingston Avenue, and I'm here representing the Livingston Avenue Area Commission, where I am the Public Service Chair. And the last Area Commission meeting, I put out an idea that I had for litter reduction. The CPO properties and other low-income subsidized housing could benefit from maybe free garbage bags. Like Sherry Palmer, you have a storehouse full of garbage bags, and I have actually spoken with Chad Kettler, who's in charge of CPO. If you think about it, if you are a low-income family with maybe a $200 discretionary income budget, $5 or $7 for garbage bags a month is maybe not at the top of your list. There's a CPO building, a 4-unit building, a couple doors down from me, and regularly when I look in that dumpster, it's all loose garbage. So when the dumpsters get tossed, it just blows down the alley. So I think that's a systematic thing we can do, maybe is working with not just CPO, but other subsidized housing providers to help make garbage bags available at no cost to residents. The Livingston Avenue Area Commission agreed on that and supported that idea to present to City Council and Councilmember Remy. 2 other items. CODA has a no food, no drink policy on their buses. Bus stops on Livingston Avenue, almost none of them have garbage receptacles. The ones that do regularly are stuffed beyond capacity. So I know I've floated this idea to you before, but I think it's a really good idea to maybe work with CODA to help get garbage receptacles and recycling receptacles at bus stops, especially on Livingston Avenue and Cleveland Avenue, which is the 2nd highest capacity bus ridership in the city. That the number 1 line is. And then thirdly, When it comes to neighborhood cleanups, we've done a lot of those in Livingston Avenue. I've been on the commission for, I believe, 8 years, maybe 9 years now, and there's some fatigue that goes along with that. You've got volunteers who come out regularly, and I'd just like to recommend to everybody that there are organizations like the Alvis House, that if you contact the Alvis House far enough in advance, you can get people to volunteer from Alvis House to help come do neighborhood cleanups. So that's a really good resource, because regular cleanups through the neighborhood can be taxing. They can be fun too, but it's, 9 years in, I've picked up a lot of litter. So I thank everybody for your help. I don't know if you have any questions for me, but that's all I had.
I will let Tim respond in just a second. I do want to point out that if those garbage receptacles are overflowing, CODA, you can call CODA and make sure that they're aware of it, and they're usually very responsive in getting out there and picking those things up. So sometimes they fill up faster than the regular route, but I do know that they have made a commitment to make sure that those things are emptied when they get called. And then you mentioned Alvis House, but also the same environmental court manages the entire municipal court in term, rather than some other types of punishment, will assign community hours, and so they actually will provide to legitimate organizations people to come out to serve their community hours to make sure that the neighborhood's clean. So they've been a really good resource. I think that's been around for about 1.5 years now, and it's been going great. So you can get a team of 12 people to come out, to help with the cleanup. So, Tim.
I just want to touch on a couple things you brought up there. The trash bag issue is something we're aware of. We've been looking. We actually did a study on this last year. Julie at our Georgeville Road Station. We did a couple of streets over in Franklinton where we had a lot of loose trash in our 300-gallon cans, and what we recognized was that when we're dumping those, that loose trash is blown around. So we were adding to the litter in the neighborhood, because by code you're required to bag your trash, but realistically it wasn't always happening. So we distributed, the council members actually walked around and distributed trash bags to a couple streets over there during a 9-week trial. It worked successfully. Our issue is we are trying to identify a corporate donation to sustain that, and we've also reached out to some food pantries to see if they would be willing to pass those out. If we do get somebody, how do you consistently give them out? That's one. It was a very labor-intensive study, but we are looking into that, and I would certainly agree that's something that is a challenge for people.
CPO Chad Kettler, he's receptive to having the case managers make sure people have garbage bags available to them. And then a follow-up question, do you have a phone number for the courts where you can get people who have community service hours? Is there a phone number that the area commission or one of our civic associations can call?
We'll get that, and I'll try to announce it before we finish tonight.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thanks,
All right, thanks,
Mr. Scarpino. Rebecca Hunley, you're up next, and if you would, just a reminder, you have 3 minutes, and if you'd state your name and any organization you may represent.
I'm Rebecca Hunley. I'm here on my own this evening. I'm out by myself, and I live at 93 Dakota Avenue. I've seen many of you many times. And there was a letter that was written in summary of 10 years of listening and talking in these kinds of forums and all other kinds of forums. And it was addressed to every member of City Council. It was delivered on June the 18th, and it does address some of the very same issues we've talked about here tonight. As for the prevention side of it, which is the only thing I'm really interested in at this point, I've been picking up litter in this neighborhood since I was 5. I've picked up tons myself, and I know that Lisa probably has caught up with me in just the short time that she's been doing what she does, because it's so consistently done. But when the city issues permits for something, why wouldn't the city also ask for the receipt for the dumpster that you're going to put the stuff in? Because in my neighborhood, because of the length of time it takes to get anybody to do anything, because there are 6 departments involved in something, if it's a set out and it's in the alley, it's on private property, it's on somebody else's property, and in the street, that's 3 or 4 different departments, and they don't arrive at the same time. And one of the issues we addressed was, excuse me, deputizing environmental code enforcement people and having enough of them to serve, in particular, the west side. We only have 3 inspectors at the county level to investigate dumping, and we have not enough cameras. However many there are, and wherever they are, if they see the camera, they can just move down the road. The same mattress dumping situation that we got, part of it was Facebook, but we have collaborated as a neighborhood, and we've probably gotten 4 or 5 actually caught, and the latest one is a tire episode. Heather, thank you for that. And so it's working, but the idea is prevention. So ask for a permit. If they're pulling out half of a house, for God's sake, they have to have a roll-off. And why isn't that addressed up front versus waiting to see what's going to happen, because we know what it is. If it's there for 24 hours, it's spread across 3 properties. If it's there for 5 days, it's spread across anywhere from 7 to 15, and this is just by observation. So there are some things that are in that letter already that are addressing exactly what we're talking about here again, for however many times that it's been addressed in the last 10, 15 years since I've been home back in Franklinton. So I would encourage enforcement. Who I don't see is the Columbus Police Department. I hear, but it sounds more like an urban myth, that there's actual enforcement on the street, because I've seen police officers witness the same thing I've witnessed. And in fact, we had a neighbor witness a dumping incident, and the police officer told her to call 311. So the cross-training between code enforcement and wherever else, and what's going on actually boots on the ground in the street, needs to be addressed. And I don't know if the police are not responding because they don't, for instance, homeless are not arrested because they'll be out by the time I get back to my beat. Well, maybe we have more community service hours for certain things when people don't have money. And I think that education, we were talking about prevention and education, there are people that can hear about it, there are people that can see it, and there are just people that need to feel it. So those folks who are out there, you don't have any money, then you must have some time. And I think community service is definitely the way to go. We have benefited from the environmental courts program under Leanne Ward's leadership, and of course Judge Hawkins. We really appreciate it once we get it there, but our code is so lax and it takes so long. We suffer interminably because every single one is a new case. Every single one has to go through 1 or more or 3 departments to get it coordinated and get it there. So that's an issue. As for the container size, I love the 300-gallon cans, just for the record. But number 2, for those places that have gotten the 90-gallon cans, and I will, before you start handing out free trash bags, I think the education needs to be done, and it needs to be done through landowners. I agree, we don't need to subsidize their business for trash. Every business on Broad Street has to provide their own dumpsters, right? So I was also at a, well, I don't want to tell who that is. Let's see. I know for a fact that there are good landlords who are completely ignorant of what the code is for trash bags and everything else. So having the landlords required to educate their tenants might be step 1 before we start handing out trash bags. And then number 2, to actually enforce it. So with 90-gallon cans, who are going to be the 43 people that walk around and say, hey, you didn't take your trash can in for 3 days. So what we're lacking is personnel on behalf of the city, and that prevention piece up front for a number of these issues, and I'll direct you back to that letter of June 18th.
Appreciate you coming in this evening, Ms. Hunley. Kathy Hoke is up next. Reminder that you have 3 minutes, Ms. Hoke, and if you would please state your name and your address and any organization you may represent.
Yes, I am Kathy Hoke. I live at 646 South Royce, Wilshire Heights. Excuse me. I am the Block Watch coordinator for my neighborhood. Tonight I'm speaking for myself. My neighbors and I, we informally pick up trash. We don't really organize it so much, but we just kind of do it on our own. So lots of us have observations. I'd like to thank the community activists here. Lisa Boggs in particular, I know, is extremely active and has made it, her activism, focus of her activism to deal with these trash issues. And I think Lisa takes on a lot. There are activists like Lisa all across our city who do a tremendous amount of work. There's a gentleman in Linden who's profiled in the Dispatch, and it's heartbreaking, all this work that we do. People like Lisa and people like the gentleman in Linden work so hard, and in 20 years, there's no real significant progress. So I would like to speak to public policy, and I think there are some good things happening. I think environmental court's working. I think the Environmental Crimes Task Force is working. However, I think the resources are so limited that not enough gets done. There's just not enough, there aren't enough investigators, there aren't enough, there's just not enough. And so I think it's public policy that we can change, asking us citizens, us residents to do more, to pick it up. I heard that term 10 years ago under Michael Coleman's administration, and it always kind of irked me a little bit. It was like we were being scolded. We people who never litter are being asked to pick up other people's litter, and we do it. We just do it. We do what we can. Maybe we could do more. But what about the people who litter, who don't even think about it? We're not messaging them. I mean, I remember the Lady Bird Johnson campaign. We don't have anything like that, locally, nationally, state. We just don't do it, but we could. We could be creative in our own community. A creative PR campaign, reaching out to the litter bugs of Columbus, Ohio. We could do that. We absolutely could do that and send the message to the people who are creating litter and dumping that it's wrong, that it's hurtful. And that we can do, we're better than that. All of us are better than that. The 300-gallon dumpsters have to go. All of them have to go. Thank you, City of Columbus, for taking them out of my neighborhood. 2 weeks' time, it's already working pretty well. Really, there's no significant glitch. In my own alley, someone from Franklin Township dumped in my alley. They came, they didn't see the dumpsters that they used to dump in, and so they just spewed them out in the alley. So I called Environmental Crimes Task Force, I online reported it. It's such a small case, I don't think it's going to get investigated because of the lack of resources. So I'll probably just have to go back like I started on Sunday and pick it all up myself. Like I started, but I found some names. I thought, well, this is evidence, but it might not meet evidence standards in court, so why bother? Maybe I should just pick it up. It's that kind of thing. It's so pervasive, the dumping mentality. We have to address on a government level, public policy. Rebecca's suggestion, I had it on my list of things to say. She said it first. I just thought of it tonight, but Rebecca thought of it long ago. Building permits. My gosh, if you're doing a clean out, you should be able to provide the receipt that you dispose of your trash properly. Of course. There'd be no extra expense in the permitting process. It's just a responsibility of the permit holder to prove that they dump properly. That's on government to do that for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Ms. Hogue. Our next speaker is Marianne Lupo. Ms. Lupo, if you could state your name, your address, and a reminder that you're limited to 3 minutes.
Hello. My name is Marianne Lupo. Can you hear me? I live at 310 South Eureka Avenue. I first would like to thank you for bringing City Council to the community. I'd like to thank everyone on the panel, including 2 of my heroes, Lisa and Bill. I want to acknowledge the television audience because I think anybody watching this is terrifically public-minded, and that's very virtuous, or they're trying to get to sleep. I've had a conversation with Mr. Swager for some time now regarding 90-gallon containers in my community, which is the Central Hilltop, and he's been very receptive. We've had a number of community meetings on this issue. This weekend, my husband, who's here, was picking up some trash that had flown out of those 300-gallon containers. And that's a typical trash issue in the Central Hilltop. People may not have bags, but we also have trash pickers. And then there are people that walk down the alleys and they toss their trash. So in the process of picking up this trash, he sticks himself, not once, but twice, with a used hypodermic syringe. So we have to go to the emergency room, and we go to Mount Carmel West. So at Mount Carmel West, here's the protocol, and I want to tell you what it is. They have to do a baseline blood test, and then he's going to have to be tested in 6 months to see if he has Hep B or Hep C. So, of course, I talked to the ER staff. I talked to them about this. I said, well, how common is this, and what is the disease rate in the community? And this is what they told me. It's purely anecdotal. I haven't looked into it. They told me more often than not, it is the children who get stuck with these used hypodermic needles. Which brings me to my overarching issue, which echoes everything that's been said here tonight, but is I think, so much more serious. This litter issue in Columbus is a public health emergency. Nothing more and nothing less. It is a public health emergency, and it is a core function of municipal government, a core function to provide sanitation to its citizens. I appreciate volunteerism, and I volunteer because I'm picking up my neighborhood every day, but it's not enough. It is not only not enough, it's not making a dent. It's not making a dent. It doesn't matter. And the fact that we're premising all of this on volunteerism is normalizing the practice of litter. When I was younger, it was all about recycling. Oh, well, we're going to do this and we're going to recycle. Now it's all about we're going to pick up litter after other people. I want to add, I've lived in other places besides Columbus. I lived in New York City. I lived in Washington Heights when it was crackland in the 80s. I walked over attics on my way to work. It was not as dirty as Columbus is today. I lived in Cleveland. I lived at Euclid and 55th, right, Michael? 55th. I lived across, I was working downtown, and I've always been an urban pioneer. I lived across from methadone clinic. It was not nearly as dirty as Columbus is today. Columbus is filthy, and it wasn't filthy when I was growing up, and it's behavior for sure, but it's also, I believe, the commitment of the city of Columbus to keeping our streets clean. And plus, I can't have Michael pick up anymore. I can't do it. I cannot risk the bed bugs, the syringes, Hep B, Hep C. Apparently the risk of AIDS is non-existent with a used syringe, but nonetheless, I told him no more. I don't want you picking up any more litter around our 300-gallon container, and I don't want you picking up for our elderly neighbor, which we've been doing for years. And my time is up, and I want to say one more thing about this, about sanitation being a core municipal function. All of us here in this room, we're neighborhood leaders, we're activists, we're creative, engaged people. Lisa Boggs is amazing. Huffman, I've got the biggest respect for him. Think about the time and energy and space we could be doing in our communities right now if we were not constantly preoccupied with this filth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your passionate testimony, Ms. Lupo. This is only the beginning of what I hope to accomplish in this role as environmental chair for City Council. There's obviously a lot of work to do, and I'm committed to working with Tim Swager and the rest of the people that you've seen in the testimony to try to make a real difference in the City of Columbus. Following this hearing, and of course the hearing that we had on Tuesday, October 2nd, we will compile our thoughts, ideas, and suggestions that were shared during both hearings to create a more comprehensive plan to address litter in the City of Columbus. In the meantime, if you have any questions or would like to share your ideas, please feel free to email me at evremy@columbus.gov. That's EVREMY@columbus.gov. Or feel free to call 614-645-3559. I want to remind everyone that's here tonight, please stop by KCB and pick up any materials that might be relevant. There's bracelets and cigarette butt ashtrays up there, pocket ashtrays. I certainly want to thank our panelists this evening, Sherry Palmer, who gave the presentation, Lisa Boggs, Bill Huffman, Trent Smith, Andrew Booker, Heather Robinson, and Tim Swager. Thank you to Officer Turner back there. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank my team, Jeff Carter and Lucy Frank, for putting on yet another phenomenal hearing. Matt Erickson from Legislative Research was here earlier, as well as our Director of Community Engagement, Aaron Gibbons, from City Council. And most importantly, I'd like to thank the community for coming out and providing your suggestions and feedbacks. It truly is appreciated. This concludes this public hearing. We look forward to our next steps. Thank you very much for your participation.